Under Violent Skies by Judy Dakin. Prologue. Clouds blotted out the moon. The night was much darker than Adam had anticipated, and he couldn't use a torch as he didn't want to alert the men to his presence. In the distance, an unearthly orange glow suffused the sky beneath the clouds. Everyone around here knew that glow. It came from Bacton Gas Terminal, where the lights blazed all night, every night, ever on the alert in case of terrorist attack. He struggled through a gap in the hedge and clambered down into the drainage ditch at the road end of the field. He was already short of breath. "Not built for this stuff anymore," he muttered. Not now that retirement and fondness for real ale had given him a proper belly. There were several inches of rust-coloured water at the bottom of the ditch. Under that was a layer of sticky mud. Thank God it had been dry recently, or he would have sunk a lot deeper. In spite of the warm night air, the feel of the cold water splashing his trousers made him shudder. These ditches cut through many of the farmers' fields. Adam had checked 2 days ago that this one made its way to the barns that were his target. Somewhere to his right he could hear the hiss and beat of an irrigator, moving back and forth. Salad crops, potatoes, carrots, they'd all be needing a bit of help in this dry spell. Farming. Who'd have guessed it? He shook his head, then cursed as he stumbled and made a grab for the bank, slicing his hand on the wild grass that covered it. Swearing, he rubbed the bleeding hand on the leg of his jeans. At least here the hedge stood high above the ditch, so he could move upright. Brambles reached out thorny fingers to snatch at the brand-new camera which was swinging around on its strap and bouncing off his beer gut. Near to the barns there were no hedges. On his reconnaissance trip, he had carefully chosen a piece of overgrown scrubland behind a high hedge to leave his car. It should be invisible to passers-by, and only the occasional local would use a minor road like that. Last night he had parked there and waited in vain, only leaving when the July dawn began to cancel out the Bacton glow. Tonight he'd returned to watch again. Just after midnight, a solitary vehicle made its way down the road, pausing briefly to drop off 3 men at the rutted, bumpy cart track which led directly to the weather-worn barns clad in corrugated iron. One of the men was carrying a large toolbox. Adam changed his shoes for Wellingtons, hung the camera around his neck and locked the car. Never quite confident that he had mastered the thing, he left his mobile behind in case it should ring. And not fancying his chances against men like these, he couldn't approach from the track. Besides, his intention wasn't to tackle them, but to collect hard evidence. He grinned at the prospect. I'll show them I haven't lost my touch. 20 yards from his target the hedge ran out. He edged along with shoulders bent, the camera swinging wildly. He steadied it with a muddy hand and peered over the edge of the bank. There were 2 barns, one larger than the other, sitting at right angles around a concrete yard. Like many farmers in the area, Jack Ellis kept various pieces of agricultural machinery remote from his house but near the fields. The doors to the smaller barn stood open. Inside, Adam could see the flicker of torches darting like fireflies about the walls and ceilings. He wriggled his bulk onto the bank to steady himself in the camera. These thefts were happening all over the region these days, but no one seemed willing or able to find enough evidence to stop it, while he, Adam Crane, was going to provide all the photographic evidence needed to complete the dossier he had already drawn up. He had a damn good idea which locals were involved. There was a grinding noise from inside the barn, followed by a clang as something fell to the ground. One of the men was speaking. Adam couldn't make out the exact words, but by the tone of his voice he was trying to hurry the other 2. Someone opened the bonnet of a car. Now all the torches were pointed to the same place, the shadowy figures peering into an engine. Taking the lens cap off and placing the camera carefully on the edge of the bank, Adam zoomed in like a paparazzo spotting a film star. He pressed the shutter. Shit, shit, shit! The camera fired off a series of rapid shots, the flashlight lighting the darkness like a strobe. Urgent voices from the barn made it clear they'd seen it. Adam shot down the bank, then struggled along the ditch, trying hard not to make any noise, until he reached the cover of the hedge. He slumped against the bank. "You fucking idiot," he hissed to himself. His heart was pounding, his chest heaving with fear and unaccustomed exercise. Forcing himself to peer through the tangle of vegetation at the base of the hedge, he could see the beams of 2 torches heading out of the barns, shadowy figures behind them. Their movement triggered the outdoor lights fastened above the doors, which blazed across the yard and into the field beyond. The 2 men were backlit, so that he couldn't make out their features. One of them began to move towards him along the bank above the ditch. The other moved in the opposite direction along the cart track. The light from the yard cast an inky shadow from the hedge into the ditch. At least he'd had enough sense to wear black clothes. Knowing that any movement would attract their attention, he fought the impulse to get up and make a run for it. He braced himself and dropped to one knee. The evil-smelling water soaked his trousers and ran like ice into his boots. He waited, shivering. The man came to a stop at the hedge and shone his torch around. Adam tried to hold his breath. The yard lights timed out, then cut in again. His pursuer walked back along the top of the ditch. He'd got away with it. Fuck, that was close. Adam took a deep breath. The man dislodged something lying in the grass and bent to pick it up. Holding it up to examine it in the light from his torch, he whistled and beckoned to the other man on the cart track. They inspected the item. Camera lens cap. Someone's spying on us. Can't have gone far. The second man swung his torch around, searching the ditch and field beyond. The splintered beam passed through the hedge inches above Adam's head. They moved along the ditch, one in each direction, their powerful torches swinging in arcs like prison searchlights. Fear galvanized Adam. He shot upright and began to race along the ditch like a startled animal, spattering water wildly, not caring how much racket he was making. With a yell, one of the men jumped into the ditch and started to chase after him. Adam lumbered along, sheer panic flooding him with adrenaline. In all his 65 years, he had never been more afraid than he was now, not even on riot duty. He could hear his pursuer gaining on him until there was a sharp cry, followed by a sudden splash. Adam hoped the man had been caught in the same brambles he was fighting. It had given him a slim chance. An engine turned over, and headlights on full, a Land Rover Defender careered out of the barn at speed. Someone had managed to get the vehicle started. "Come back!" Adam heard the man on the bank shout to his pursuer. "Faster in the landy!" They'd be armed. These types always were. He'd be safer in the middle of the fields, harder to find. Adam struggled on. His chest felt as though it was bound with a steel band. He drew short, rasping breaths, and his vision clouded with red flashes. The mud in the bottom of the ditch was sucking at his boots, and his thighs burned with the effort of pulling them out. One Wellington became embedded in the slime. Not daring to stop and retrieve it, he stumbled on. The rubbish in the bottom of the ditch sliced into the sole of his foot. The overgrown grasses lacerated his arms and face. Brambles grabbed at his clothes like demon fingers trying to hold him back. Panting in terror, blinded with effort, Adam lurched into a blank wall. It was a dead end. He must have taken a wrong turn into one of the connecting ditches. He slid down the bank in despair. Everything hurt. Above the noise of his gasps, Adam could hear the Land Rover. The arguing men were still scanning the field with their torches. The headlights began to bounce out of the yard and along the track towards the main road. His wrong turn had brought him close to the track. Too close. There were no hedges here to protect him. He crawled frantically away from the bank on his hands and knees and burrowed beneath a thick clump of undergrowth at the bottom of the ditch. He lay on his side in the stinking red mud, stretching his neck to keep his face out of the rusty water, willing his breathing to slow. The vehicle approached along the track, stopping every few yards, the men climbing out to search the fields and ditches. But in spite of their thoroughness, by some miracle, they drove on by. When they'd moved past, he'd almost pissed himself. Not that anyone would notice. He was completely soaked. The men reached the road and stopped. After a short, furious argument, they gave up. The vehicle doors slammed and Adam heard it drive off along the narrow lane towards Haysborough. He lay in the vile water for a long time, shaking with cold and shock. Slowly he edged out from underneath the scrub. Peering cautiously over the top of the bank, he made sure that there was no one around, no silent guard left to wait for him. Exhausted, he stumbled up onto the track. His body was covered with scratches, cuts and bruises, his clothes soaked and ripped. No point in trying to hide now. He began to limp along the track to the lane and his car. The new camera swung from its strap, smashed and dripping blood-red water. There would be little chance of salvaging any pictures. "I'll pay for this tomorrow," Adam grumbled, hobbling along. "Come to that, I'm bloody paying for it now." The road under his bootless foot was rough, and he winced with every step. Nearing the gap in the hedge where he had hidden his car, he fumbled with bloodied and uncooperative fingers for his car keys. Then, without warning, headlights blinded him.